Hey guys, this is a spot training video. I think I'm going to use videos to talk with you guys. It's hard to get everybody in one place, and with COVID going on, it just makes sense to use this technology. So I'll have some spot training videos from time to time, and this is the first one. Okay, what we're going to cover in this video is pretty quick. I made some changes with microphones and mute buttons, the mute group buttons. And then we're also going to talk about why I want you to use mute group buttons. And then I want to talk about a situation that happened 2 weeks ago and how we solved it and what we learned from it. First, I'll talk about changes of the mute group and microphone placement. Okay, so here we are at the soundboard. I want to show you that I have moved the organ to the instrument side. I used to have on the vocal side, it used to be right over here. But having the organ on one side and the piano on the other side, it didn't make sense. I talked to Dale about it and he agreed. So I moved the organ here and the piano there, okay? And so that's a pretty quick change. Okay, the change with the mute groups. Okay, let's go over here. So here are the mute groups. The mute groups 1 and 2 will be both for the 8:30 service. This will be piano and organ, and this is the choral mics. Okay, so look over here. If I push this, you'll see that the organ and the piano will mute and unmute together. Okay, on this mute group. This one is for the choral mics, which are on the next level. So there are the choral mics we use, okay, which are, you can see them right down there, okay. So the choral mics will be this button. Look over here, I'll push it. You can see them go off, all right? Now I did this because sometimes they play piano and organ music when the voices aren't singing and we don't want feedback. So this is what you do. If we're about to sing hymns, you just go like this, bam. And you've unmuted both the keyboards, both organ and piano, and you've unmuted the voices. Now if they're just going to do some instrumental music, go ahead and mute the choral mics because they will give feedback and they'll give extraneous noises. So once again, if we approach a hymn and they're going to sing, you just, well now I've muted them, you unmute both at the same time. And so on this side it's instruments, the keyboard instruments, on this side it's the voices. The same thing with the 1045 service. This is the whole instrumental band and that's the whole vocal band. Let's look over here. So here we go. There's the vocal side. And of course that's the unused mic, Sarah's mic. So if I push this right here, that's unmuting the voices. If I go to the second layer, or actually it's the first layer, and I push this one, you'll see the whole band unmute. Now the only exception, as Darren has mentioned before, is the piano doesn't unmute. You cannot assign, or if you do assign a channel multiple mute buttons, it gets really confusing. It just doesn't really unmute. It didn't work well. So the piano, you'll have to unmute manually. But all the other instruments, when you do this one, mute group 3, you'll see that does that. But you have to do the piano manually. And you know, the piano is in a situation where it really doesn't increase chances for feedback. It's taped to the 3 mics, taped to the underside of the piano, and there's really no possibility for any feedback. But anyway, once again, the first 2 buttons, organ and piano, and choir mics, okay? And you can do them both at the same time when you need to. And then instruments of the praise band and voices of the praise band. And you can do them both at the same time. All right, now I wanted to make a quick video about why we need to use mute groups. If you don't like mute groups and you try to unmute things manually, you're going to end up missing things. We've had numerous times where we have the piano unmuted, but the organ's not unmuted, and the voices are not unmuted, and so what they hear in the video world is just the piano, and then they see singers standing at mics. So the mute groups guarantee that you will unmute everything you need to all at once. So I would really like everybody to consistently use the mute group buttons. You guys have a lot to do, and this really cuts your time in half on unmuting stuff, and it's a one-stop shop, or one button stop. You don't have to go to different layers and mute and unmute things. You can do it all with the mute groups. So I'd like everyone to really learn how to use the mute groups. And I think I've organized it very clearly. Okay, the 830s at the top of the mute group button, instruments on left and voices on right, and then mute group buttons 3 and 4, instruments on left, voices on right. It's pretty clear. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, now I want to talk about something that happened in one of our services. And I asked Branson if I could share the story so we could all learn from it. Okay, so 10:45 service is going, everything's working well, and then suddenly I see people in the balcony, Branson and Chris, and they're both panicking. And then Branson successfully pantomimes to me, no sound, and I understood what he was saying, so good pantomime, Branson, very good. So I thought, okay, we started our praise songs, and I thought we'll solve it later, okay? And they were troubleshooting, and Branson called Darren. Good move, Branson. We use our resources. And they devised a strategy. It didn't work, but that's okay. They were putting their heads together. So I went up there later, and what happened was the video channel was muted, okay? Now, we're trying to figure out when this happened. And so they tried a variety of things, but the problem was the video channel itself was muted. Let me show you what I mean. So this is what happened. They tried a bunch of different things, and I came up here, and I pressed here, and that sends on fader. I pressed the video channel, and that's what I saw. The video channel was muted. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because it points, there's a principle here at work that we may want to know to help us not be confused. And I'm just as confused as all of you. I think it could have been this. Branson said it could have been that he has developed a routine where he likes to keep things muted, and he may have just pushed here, selected here, and muted here before he went on to other things. So it could have been an accidental mute push, but it could have also been this. It could have been that he went to go listen to a solo, but he pressed the mute button accidentally. And so I wanted to raise that question. Let's remind ourselves that the mute button is red and the solo button is orange. Now, they're not completely contrasting colors. Maybe another color would be better. But let's remind ourselves, the select button is up here, it's green. The solo button is here, and the mute button is here. And there have been times where I have had to think twice about these two buttons, especially in the middle of doing stuff. And then we panic. And so anyway, that's what happened. It was muted. And I came over here and I saw it, and I'm kind of happy it was muted because that means there was no equipment problems. It was just an innocent user error, which we all do. And I was just happy that all I did was I unmuted this, and then Chris looked up from his headphones and gave the thumbs up, and he said, I hear everything. So good news that our equipment wasn't damaged, and good news that we have found another way of preventing problems from happening. Okay, so once again, thank you, Brandon, for letting me tell that story. And so what we learned was that we want to be careful distinguishing between the mute button and the solo button. And we can gently remind each other of that if we start to kind of slip up, okay? Because we're all learning and we're all striving to get a little better each time we do it. Now, there's another principle at work here too, and that is this. What is our protocol when things don't work right? Well, let me give an example. Anytime you have a computer problem and you call tech crew, what they'll do is they'll say this. Is the computer plugged in? Did you turn the computer on? Because sometimes those easiest things we overlook and we quickly go to machine malfunction. So our takeaway is this. If something happens like this in the future, we have to ask ourselves, are all the channels unmuted that need to be unmuted? Are all the faders where they need to be? But in that instance, I think what happened is panic set in, and everybody started to think about mechanical problems and stuff like that. And So let's remind ourselves, the protocol is make sure all the faders are where they're supposed to be so sound's coming through. Let's make sure everything that is unmuted, that needs to be unmuted. And then we can go on from there with the mechanical stuff. But I put myself in that same category of when things go wrong, I panic and my mind starts to just go different places. So I thought it was helpful for all of us to develop a protocol. Make sure faders are where they need to be, and make sure things are unmuted, and make sure we didn't confuse the solo button with the mute button. So that's it for today's spot training session. Once again, thank you, Branson, for letting me tell the story. I appreciate your willingness to help us all learn from this experience. And I really treasure all of you. I appreciate you giving your time, learning how to use this equipment. It's complex, and there's a lot of stuff going on that has to happen at the same time, and I appreciate you guys, and so does our church family, both here and online. And there's people around the country who tune in who appreciate it as well. And anytime you have an idea, shoot it my way. You may have found a way to make things work even better, but we'll continually try to make easy steps to make it easier for you to do this and to be more successful and to feel more comfortable about it. Thanks.